The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Business Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericabusiness.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Is your company about to be involved in a merger or acquisition? No matter what side of the deal you are on, this can be a daunting and very risky part of business. Welcome to Beyond Financials, the people side of mergers and acquisitions with Sonya Weigle. On each show, you'll hear from top executives representing a variety of industries. We'll discuss the success stories, best practices, and lessons learned that can help you engineer a smooth transition that's good for your business and celebrated by your people. Now, here's your host, Sonya Weigle.
Hello, and welcome to Beyond Financials, the people side of mergers and acquisitions. I'm your host, Sonya Weigle. Every week we come together to discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of mergers and acquisitions with guests who bring expertise and seasoned experience to the conversation. Think of this as your once-a-week consulting hour, where you can gain powerful insights and knowledge about the successes, failures, and lessons learned through the wisdom and experience of guests that each week come from a variety of industries and represent all sides of a deal. As the title indicates, we'll focus on the people side of M&A. Specifically, culture, behaviors, human capital strategy, and processes. How often have we seen deals that were beautifully architected from a finance or legal perspective, only to fall apart post-close because of culture clashes? My firm, SWC Management Consulting, works with companies every day to navigate the very important but often tricky world of organization transformation. We help our clients ensure these transformations are executed flawlessly and in a way that drives the success of their business. I love getting to work with our clients to bring tangible impact through human resources. Helping companies to harness their most important asset, their people, is why I do this. It's my hope to use this radio show as a platform to help many of you in the same way. By hosting an interactive show that gives the listening audience access to the best minds in this business for the benefit of themselves and their companies. Okay, let's get the conversation started. I have with me today Gregory Reynolds, CEO and co-founder of g-dii, and Dr. Debb Gordon, g-dii's chief scientist. g-dii was created by a team of business leaders and experts who saw a unique opportunity in the marketplace to develop human insights solutions that could truly assess, measure, and improve cultures of performance with empowered individuals. This is actually part two of a discussion that we first had in December on the role of diversity and inclusion in mergers and acquisitions. In part one, we learned about the science behind g-dii's powerful workplace assessment tool and their initial thinking on D&I in M&A. Well, I'm thrilled to bring Debb and Greg back today because since we last talked, g-dii has completed some new research on the correlation between who people are and their tendency towards inclusivity. I'm honored and excited to have you both back on the show today, and welcome to both of you.
Hi, Sonya. It's a pleasure to be back on your show.
Thanks. Hi, Debb.
Hi, Sonya. Thank you so much for having us.
No, I'm so thrilled to have you guys back. So since we last talked in December, you guys have been very, very busy. And I'd love it if you could just sort of share with our audience what's been going on with g-dii, with the business. I know you guys are always doing really cool research and looking into things in a new and unique way in the D&I space. Can you share a little bit about what's going on now that you're into 2017?
Well, Sonya, it has been an amazing start of the year. I jokingly say that it's like we've been drinking out of the fire hydrant. We've had a wonderful reception with corporate clients, that our unique perspective of looking at how the individual shows up in the workplace as an empowered individual and what that means to culture has been really well received. So since our last discussion, we've been onboarding new clients, starting to work with them to look at the connection of where culture impacts business performance. As we look at not only our solution that we last discussed, which is our g-dii assessment, we've actually started to create a number of additional measurements. One of the things that I've learned since working with Dr. Gordon, Deb, is that as a layman, I always thought there was only one FICO score. And Deb shared with me that there are over 45 different scores. So we're on an amazing path to start to create an arsenal of measurements to deconstruct culture for the benefit of both our customers and society.
Wow, that's exciting. So you mentioned FICO scores. So how do FICO scores relate to the way that you guys assemble and assess data? Give me the correlation.
Well, I'm going to give you a headline, and then I'll ask Deb to kind of take it from there. Really, FICO is kind of I would say, a similar type of measurement. And because of Deb's background, she was one of the original scientists that participated in building the original FICO score in 1989, and then worked with FICO for a number of years. And so when I first conceived g-dii and the assessment, I knew that I wanted an empirical measurement, something that was objective and non-judgmental. And the thing as a layman that was most familiar with me was really FICO. Mm-hmm. So it became somewhat of a kind of a catchphrase. But with that, I have continued, as well as the enterprise, to continue to learn. And with Deb coming in, we have been that intellectual curiosity of kind of always asking the question of what are new elements of culture that we can identify, capture, measure, and then assist our client organizations in impacting that with business performance and enterprise transformation. So with that, I'll kind of turn it over to Deb to kind of give a better sense of what are some of the new measurements that we started to create.
Okay, I would like to sort of support Greg's comment on the FICO score. Most people are not aware. They see one score and they're assuming it's the same score. FICO changes scores depending on the current situation and the history of the consumer that's being scored. So if, for instance, you've never had any delinquencies in the past and you have no delinquency now, you'd be called a super clean in the FICO term. So there are a number of different scores. g-dii is no different. We need a variety of scores to be able to get at a number of sensitive issues and to go deeper into those issues. So one of the scores that we talked about last time was what we refer to as our tolerance and empathy score, or g-dii score. That is a score that measures your openness and sensitivity to others, as well as an individual's empathy to another person. We've added into that our inclusion assessment, which looks at varying levels, in fact, all levels of an organization, to be able to determine how employees feel about the group that they're in, both from a group perspective and from a personal perspective, and how they feel about their manager, and how the manager feels how they're doing and about that group. And this goes all the way up to the top of the organization from the most fundamental level. From that, we can find gaps. We can find areas where, say, not all the employees feel included, some feel excluded, or some feel that they've had to assimilate to a group mindset, for example, or potentially feel that they are respected for their value, but they're really not included in the group. So they're what we call differentiators. In addition, we also will look at the manager, how the manager interacts with the group. We've seen some very interesting results where the group together feels highly inclusive and well appreciated, but when the manager comes in, they feel like they must assimilate. So we can see very subtle differences that are going on in personalities. And we can see that throughout the organization.
I'm interested to know what size organizations do you typically work with? Is there a particular industry size that it makes the most sense for, or are you sort of size agnostic?
Well, it's interesting, Sonya. We were very fortunate in our early stage to be sponsored and endorsed by Time Warner. They are really on the forefront of diversity and inclusion and culture. With that, our initial focus has really been on the Fortune 1000. Mm-hmm. So, ultimately, it's a universal measurement. But as a kind of a new startup, our focus has been kind of global Fortune 1000 companies. Anywhere, some organizations have as few as say 10,000 employees, and one of our clients in just one division alone has over 200,000. So it's interesting, the type of work that we're doing. And at this particular point, we're really partnering with organizations to answer those questions that have been so elusive for so many years. We're in kind of our initial partnering stage with some of the world's leading organizations.
Wow. Deb, does the data or the analytics translate ultimately to a middle market size company? Because we all know that the large companies have the resources and the need to do this at a global level, but some of those same organizational issues and ouches are very much present in, say, the middle market space. So from a data collection and analysis perspective, can you envision similarities in the outcomes inside smaller groupings of people?
Absolutely. We've been able to build an assessment that's sensitive enough that we can see it from a group as small as 2 people to with their manager, the engagement involvement with their manager. And there are many cases where that isn't communicated. So the team may feel one way, the manager may feel another, but they're not telling each other. They tend to go on throughout the day or throughout their week and just sort of hide these or don't really communicate them. So yes, we can get down to a very personal level. The inclusion assessment coupled with the g-dii assessment gives us also the ability to see what the levels of empathetic management are from the management side. So it helps us try to bring them together and at least create a conversation and awareness that there are gaps. And they don't exist everywhere. So you can focus your energies and your efforts where you do see gaps.
So I know that what you're doing is really very forefront, and I'm fascinated by the way you're aggregating what I think a lot of people think they know about. The idea of diversity and inclusion is certainly not a new concept, but I love the fact that you guys are looking at it through a new lens. I mean, how would you describe the conventional wisdom on this topic, and how would you compare that to, if there's a comparison, to what you're finding in your research and in your survey work?
I'll start, and Deb, you might want to kind of continue the discussion, but I think that where we start is really in that place of the things that you don't know about yourself or organization, kind of that subconscious level, the blind spots of individuals that actually, those blind spots have a direct impact on the overall enterprise. So I think that that's what is decidedly unique about where we start.
I would like to add to that, we don't look at things as absolutes. So, we hear terms like unconscious bias. There are degrees in all of us of different types of biases or limitations. And we don't build these tests for the purposes of trying to say, oh, you are biased against something. We look at the degree of that bias. And we try to find ways to help individuals learn opportunity areas. So there's no wrong or bad or negative component to these tests. They're entirely focused on identification and growth.
Very interesting. I'm so interested to know, when you are testing folks and testing individuals, what their perspectives are when they come in to participate in something like this. Are what they're expecting and sort of what you deliver in alignment, or do you find that people are surprised by the outcomes?
It's a little of both. What we're finding is, especially in the empathy test, is that people often find it a very difficult test to take. In fact, our marketing group refers to it as icky, because it's the test asks you to look through the eyes of another person, and they define that person, and you have to answer or respond to the images in our test as if you were someone else, and that's hard. So often that aspect of the test hits people completely off guard, and they find it illuminating because they find it hard to see the world through another person's eyes.
That's definitely the basis for all of this, right? I mean, the goal or the name of the game is to create enough awareness of yourself and of others to have some meaningful impact on bringing true inclusivity into an organization. So I love the fact that you have figured out how to quantify that in some ways, because that really does lend an additional level of credibility to this as we tie it to business outcomes and to business strategy. So let's take a quick break. And guys, when we come back, let's talk a little more about some of the recent survey work that you've done and the correlations that you're finding. We'll do that when we come back in just a few minutes with Greg and Deb from g-dii. Thank you for tuning in so far, and we'll talk to you soon after the break.
The business community's first choice in Internet Talk Radio, Voice America Business Network.
If you think you've seen online TV before, let us surprise you.
VoiceAmerica.tv is online now.
The leader in live Internet Talk Radio has done it again. Multiple channels, a state-of-the-art viewing experience, live and on-demand programs streaming 24 hours a day. It's exactly what you want, when you want it.
VoiceAmerica.tv.
From health and wellness to business, sports, and everything in between. Discover our new world. Visit VoiceAmerica.tv now and experience the future of online television.
VoiceAmerica.tv.
The Voice America Live Events page is here now to showcase your corporate, individual, or organization's live event. Visit voiceamerica.com/live events to see all of our past live events and find out more. Whether it's a multi-day conference, special speaker, or single-day event, we've got everything to make your event a success. We can do a few hours or a few days. For more information about taking your event to the next level, call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417 or email info@voiceamerica.com. Again, that's Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417 or send us an email to info@voiceamerica.com.
Whether the market's up or down, or if you're looking to improve your portfolio, our experts are ready to talk to you. Call now toll free 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Voice America Business Network.
Follow the Voice America Talk Radio Network on Twitter. We're at Voice America TRN. You'll get the latest fix on what's happening with our shows, this week's featured guests, and general happenings that you should know about at the Voice America Talk Radio Network. Now you don't have to miss anything when you're away from your home or office. Just go to twitter.com/Voice America TRN or follow along with us at Voice America TRN, the Voice America Talk Radio Network. We're on the cutting edge of social media. Can you keep up?
You are tuned in to Beyond Financials, the people side of mergers and acquisitions with Sonya Weigle. To reach our program today, please call 1-866-472-5790. Again, that's 1-866-472-5790. You may also send an email to info@sweigleconsulting.com. Now, back to Beyond Financials, the people side of mergers and acquisitions.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm here with Greg Reynolds, CEO and co-founder of g-dii, and Dr. Debb Gordon, their chief scientists. Let's get back to our conversation. When we left for the break, we were going to start to talk about some of the really interesting survey work that you've done and some of the information that you're finding out on these matters. And I know that you guys take a very specific look, a very interesting way to look at these things. And so I'm really interested to hear what the survey's results are telling you.
You know, Sonya, the interesting part about our evolution, and I will definitely kind of turn it over to Deb to go deeper in it, is that when we first started out, we created the g-dii assessment, which is what we recently presented at the convening hosted by Time Warner and Merrill Lynch. And when we started out, we actually thought that tolerance plus empathy would equal inclusion. And what we soon found out is, by actually capturing and measuring at the individual level, is that it did not equal inclusion, and that there were certain findings. And so, as a enterprise, what we started to adapt as a part of our culture was that intellectual curiosity. That we now go tolerance plus empathy equals inclusion ? Or inclusion plus tolerance and empathy equals culture ? So we have been building these measurements to continue to go deeper, to continue to try to find those nuanced answers to where culture impacts. So with that, I'll turn it over to Deb.
Thank you, Greg. Let's sort of back up a bit. For many years, diversity and inclusion have been put together in the same sentence. The object is to try to integrate minorities in with the majority. That was the object. But diversity and inclusion are very much different. And as I've said before, it's like peanut butter and jelly. They're often put together, but they're very different things. You could have a highly inclusive group with no diversity, and you could have a highly diverse group with no inclusiveness. Right. So the object was to try to get down to the elements that really drive, inclusion and acceptance and that open-mindedness. And I like to refer to it as our goal is to have everybody see each other with an open mind and an open heart. So how do we get to that point? And we started looking at some of the fundamentals, some of the behavioral aspects and psychological aspects that drive both inclusion and that openness that we would like to see, and looked at ways to measure that. So what we're seeing, interestingly enough, in our research is that we didn't find that if you had let's say a very high score on g-dii. So that means you have a great deal of sensitivity and openness to others. We didn't see that was specific to any demographic or any age group. So it was surprising that we all have fundamentally different levels or different degrees of openness and different degrees of areas where we are less open. So that was an important finding for us to say that this isn't a demographic factor. This isn't a minority versus a majority factor. This is a factor of human behavior and human psychology. So from there, we wanted to go down deeper. We wanted to say why. What is it that people are doing that drives their sort of way of interactions together? We looked at a variety of functions to be able to say what's underneath all of the factors behind that openness, that sensitivity, and that empathy. So our key finding was it's not related to any specific demographic or age. It's not even related to geography.
And Sonya, when you start to think about like the conventional wisdom in M&A, to the point of understand the gap in your culture. Excuse me, that you want to focus and, identify down to like the line level of, what is the existing culture in the two organizations that you are assessing for either integration or acquisition, and identify what's working well for both. We're taking it to a deeper level. Mm-hmm. And so when you start to imagine the possibilities of having the type of, measurements that you find in other aspects of the deal, imagine where, the percentage of successful conclusions of acquisitions, how those will increase, how those insights, and not from, kind of a high level of, really looking at what, people perceive to be culture, which is, what are our, what's our mission, what's our statement, our mission mm-hmm. statement, our principles, and how are we living it? But really taking it down to not only the individual, but then kind of expanding that into areas of the organization where, varying degrees of culture exist and where is alignment. So we're really talking about a new way of kind of considering not only who we are, but what are the enterprises that we're trying to bring together and what can we expect from performance.
It'd be really interesting to take that and to not only do an assessment of where we are culture-wise along the lines as you all are suggesting, but to almost construct or pre-construct the ideal culture as it relates to what will be the two merged organizations in the future. So it's not just a matter of, who are we now and what's the gap between the two of us as individual organizations, but given where we want to take this combined entity and what the strategy is around that, what does that culture need to look like? And what's that third level gap between the two individuals' current cultures and then, and then the merged culture and then what the culture ultimately should be, right? So kind of looking into the future and proactively designing that culture based on what you're able to find doing the initial assessments.
Exactly. And then also the nuance of, recognizing that depending on the size of the organizations that you're merging together, where are, those kind of natural integration points, and what are the element or what are the areas that might need, extra attention, and then also how do you accelerate that combining, that kind of, merging together of cultures. And when we, speak of cultures, I think the one thing that, we've recognized that, we conflate a lot of terms, culture, diversity, inclusion, but at the end of the day, cultures are made up of individuals. Mm-hmm. And so what we're really focused on is, once you're starting to look at an entity as its entire workforce, and what are the levels in which you can kind of capture and measure, kind of going down, as Deb has said, to as small of a team of two. Imagine the possibilities of not only modeling that out and kind of living in the world of predictive analytics of what is the success of the potential success of the merger, but how do you impact it? What are those levers that you can pull to optimize culture for business results?
There's a point that I'd like to make, if I could, Sonya. When you go into a company, we are sort of assuming a culture is one thing. You may have at the board level and the C-suite a culture that is innovative and inclusive. But you get down to an operation level, maybe a call center, where it is command and control. Or a sales culture within that organization, which is highly competitive and based on incentives that may be completely counter to what the original culture is. So the problem is you don't know that. You just assume from the top down that you understand the culture. It may be very different in actuality than what your mission statement and your principles state. So getting that knowledge first, and then understanding across two different entities before they are merged, what is working for them from a performance perspective and what isn't, where you have high retention and where you don't. Those are all factors that are incorporated into the analysis when we go into an organization.
It's interesting what you said. When you're talking about the subcultures within the culture, that adds an added level of complexity that I am sure predominantly is entirely under-recognized in doing these assessments, if we do them at all. But, when they're done, the notion of these subcultures is a really, really interesting component. So how do you help an organization analyze these things to that extent and then utilize that information to really set themselves up for success from a cultural alignment and merge perspective?
Greg, do you want to start?
I think really where, as an enterprise that we start to go is really in the power of the individual, and recognizing that, as we start to look at these organizations and, kind of where there's, what are kind of those centers of excellence that are kind of the reason behind the merger. Like, ultimately, what are we trying to get out of the merger? Is it that we're trying to, drive revenue growth? Is it, we're trying to look at innovation, and where do those pockets exist? And by being able to go deeper and starting there, then you can start to build out from, those centers of excellence to the broader merger and where it makes sense.
Makes sense. Deb, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to get back to the individual, but let's start with what are the primary goals and motivations for the merger. So as you bring organizations together, you may have synergies in particular areas that you are seeing potentially financially. What we can do is verify if those synergies will pan out, because the employees, merging the employees, will be compatible. For the most part, let's say you have one organization with a higher retention rate than the other. You may want to look closely at what makes that retention rate unique. It could be as simple as one person, one manager, and the philosophy that they're, exposing their employees to, versus another manager in the other aspect of the merger or the acquisition, which has a higher turnover rate. So we try to take into account the values from the merger and the acquisition, as well as the areas where synergies could be possible. Because the last thing you want to do, and you know this better than any of us, is you don't want to go through all of this and find that you've destroyed the synergies that you originally projected.
Yeah, when you destroy synergies, the things that are at risk at that point are productivity, customer service, quality. All of these things are unintended consequences of not doing these things the right way from the very front, and understanding what areas, in addition to the traditional components of due diligence, need to be assessed and analyzed before we even contemplate consummating a deal.
Exactly.
It's a very, very risky component to ignore or to not understand that you need to discover.
The other concern that I have is that in any acquisition or merger, you have employees who are feeling disrupted and fearful. Getting to those employees and recognizing their value, helping to sort of quelch or reduce their uncertainty at a very personal level, and working on the key insights to help bring people together. Those are all components that will help for success.
And are these things that you can assess for prior to due diligence or prior to the deal closing? It's, sometimes it's hard or not even allowed to engage with employees before a deal is done. Some deals have to be done in the dark. Yes. So, how can you encourage leaders to do that kind of work when sometimes it's not necessarily part of the due diligence?
It is difficult. If they are open to really working to create a collaborative merger, it's much more likely to happen. If it is more of an aggressive or a takeover type of situation, less likely to happen. But in both cases, being able to make those assessments and help bring people together will benefit the combined organization.
Yeah, that's certainly part of why this show exists, is to kind of spread the good news and evangelize about the notion that, even in not so friendly integrations, if at the end of the day the outcome is success that you want, these are things and conversations and assessments that need to happen. And opening up communication with employees to help assuage some of those fears, Deb, that you were talking about, it certainly pays a tremendous dividend on the other end in terms of a successful outcome. So let's take another break. And when we get back, I'd love to talk with you guys about some of what you're seeing and what you're seeing that's been successful, some experiences you may have had where things were not as successful, just some best practice discussion. So we will be right back. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in so far. We'll be back after a few minutes with Greg Reynolds and Debb Gordon of g-dii.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
Are you finding your frequency? It can be described as that space between failure and success. It's the future of digital media. It's finding your voice. It's engaging topics, content, and ideas. Jeff and Ryan discuss the digital media space and all of its aspects. It's about making the mistakes, taking the chances, summoning the intestinal fortitude to step out of your comfort zone, and discovering what you can accomplish when you decide to try, decide to learn, decide that you have something to say, and find your frequency. Live Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 5 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Variety Channel.
The latest business information is made simple with the Voice America Business Network. The professionals in the business world bring you live talk radio shows featuring an array of business topics, strategies for building wealth, sales and marketing, stock trading, investing, and business technology. Voice America Business hosts are professionals in their fields and bring to the airwaves weekly business discussions that offer up-to-date information, advice, and education. The Voice America Business Network. The bottom line in business talk.
Now you can take your favorite Voice America radio program with you anywhere. Sign up for our mobile app if you have an iPhone, Android, or BlackBerry. The Voice America Interactive Radio Player, powered by Aircast, gives you the freedom to listen to any of our programs, anywhere, live and on demand. No registration is required. Listen to your favorite Voice America hosts and discover new ones. Download the Voice America mobile app for iPhone, Android, or BlackBerry, powered by Aircast. Visit the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
Up-to-date business and financial news. Call now and get the financial information you need. 866-472-5790. 866-472-5790.
The experts are here.
Voice America Business Network.
You are tuned in to Beyond Financials, the people side of mergers and acquisitions with Sonya Weigle. To reach our program today, please call 1-866-472-5790. Again, that's 1-866-472-5790. You may also send an email to info@sweigleconsulting.com. Now, back to Beyond Financials, the people side of mergers and acquisitions.
Welcome back, everyone. I am here with Greg Reynolds and Debb Gordon of g-dii. And at the break, we were talking about the importance of engaging with employees to help assuage some of their fears before a deal is done for the benefit of future success and sustainability of the merger itself. But that's not always possible. And I'm very interested to know, guys, what can be done when things when a deal probably has to be done in the dark, or where the circumstances don't necessarily allow for easy interaction with employees before a deal is actually consummated.
Well, I'll chime in there, Sonya. I think that we imagine a future possibility where companies have their g-dii index, that they are measuring up front the level of diversity, openness, empathy, and that they actually can both message this internally to their workforce, but also externally. And through that kind of new kind of current state, where organizations, it's not something like this is what we believe our culture is, this is who we believe we are, but actually being able to see kind of the range of openness and empathy within an enterprise, how it's evolving, so that if you were going through a acquisition and you were looking at an organization, you would have some kind of market information going in about what are some likely opportunities. And then, from that kind of starting point, at least there would be greater insights to alignment. And then post-merger, or during, the actual due diligence, that then we could go deeper. You could unlock greater insights to elements of your organization and really look at, true value, kind of that last metric that has been missing in M&A. So we kind of envision a world where both as a part of the workforce, you would want to know before you joined an organization what is kind of the range of openness and empathy and kind of their g-dii index, so that you actually know kind of what you're getting into, what you're signing up for. That, here's kind of our co-accountability that, say GE has a score of X, and if you're a new employee or a prospective employee, you can look at your own score. You come to GE and you know that there's an expectation that you will continue to grow. And then for GE, they can message back to their workforce around what is that expectation, and then you can kind of just take that to the next level as organizations are looking at where are opportunities. They can also start to use the g-dii index to start to assess whether or not an opportunity exists around a culture integration.
That is awesome. I love the idea of being able to quantify this, and there are multiple applications for that score. And to the extent that you can quantify that and have a set or available score, you can weave that in to part of the quantitative analysis for due diligence on a deal. That's a whole new area of opportunity. That's very exciting, guys.
And also the score is dynamic. And that's the other piece that's so critical in how you're thinking about it, that it's not just kind of a stagnant measure. That we've used correlations in the past, and it's like, okay, well, this is your D&I score, this is your kind of culture index, but really looking at how where an organization is at one particular moment and how we would evaluate. So, we really see a brave new world as we look at this kind of universal measurement, our core g-dii assessment.
If I can add, think about it from internal to an organization. You can create a motivation, a goal, as it were, that you would want all of your employees to strive to be in the 75th or greater percentile on g-dii, and be able to incent your employees to achieve that. You can do it when they merge over by saying, that there will be some type of reward or motivation. It could be simple as a certificate. It could be, an extra vacation day. But to get your employees all to a certain point where they're consistent, g-dii also will change over time. We do believe that the score itself is a learning experience. So the more times you take the g-dii score, you improve it each time you take it, because you're becoming more aware of that levels of sensitivity, the openness that you need as an individual, and your level of empathy.
And so your individual score also could travel with you.
Yes.
Exactly. And that, and the way that we look at this is that, your personal development should be personal and private. That, we look at the g-dii assessment in its current state, where it's something that the individual takes, that, we don't collect, identifiable information on the actual individual. We provide the insights back to them so that they see their blind spots. And by aggregating that information back up to the company, then the individual has context of what that score means to them in their workplace, so that they can start to see, kind of the diversity that exists, kind of across the entire organization, within their region, within their office, within their team, and what, kind of their fullness that they were kind of blinded to, the blind spots. How has that impacted them? We've done some initial research, and one of the examples that we oftentimes suggest is that there was a person who had self-disclosed that they were a 30-plus-year-old straight white man, and their levels of tolerance were very high for everything, excluding gender. And their scores kind of fell at a place where they objectified women. And so when you think about who that individual might be in an organization where they perceive themselves to be highly open and progressive and tolerant, and individuals within the organization might also kind of validate that, but yet because they objectify women, there is a disconnect. And how does that show up in the teams that they build and their interactions and the like? So that's the exciting part about this, and that once there's a part of it that we believe in our initial deployments with organizations, that it really is about how the organization will continue to support and a person's evolution. How do they reward it? But we also believe that as this continues to evolve, it's also personal. What are the things that we are doing that all of this marketing reinforces our worldview and is not helping us to be who we really want to be? So what we believe with the g-dii assessment is that we are starting to give individuals insights into who they are, so that they can start to make their own decision of who they want to be, and can create new relationships with the world around them to start to get opportunities of development that are moving them where they want to go, rather than possibly keeping them kind of trapped in their current reality.
One of the things that we really haven't touched on yet, which I'd be interested in your perspective on, is the notion that diversity and inclusion is, morally the right thing to do. I don't think there are many people out there that would disagree with that. But from a business perspective, how do we move it out of the sort of, moral obligation column to something that's a discernible and definitive driver of business success? And, given the fact that you guys are so data-driven on these sort of squishy topics, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do we get organizations, particularly those that are doing very well, they're financial services industry organizations that are making money hand over fist, right? So how do we move them off? It's a nice thing to do, to, okay, this is a critical component of sustainable success.
Well,
I can jump in really quick. We don't just look at our own assessments. When we engage with a client, we ask them to give us, their key performance indicators, the information that's important to them, and we correlate all of this together. There may be areas that are working wonderfully, and there may be areas that aren't. So it again, we're talking about individuals, we're talking about humans, and humans have strengths and they have weaknesses when it comes to social interactions. So the object here is to help make the relationship between performance and their population and help them find what works for them. So Greg often refers to this as optimal culture, which is a way of saying, in some parts of your organization, you may have a competitive sales operation and people love it and it's working well. In other areas, you really may need, more innovative areas, you may need a more inclusive environment, and you can improve through that process.
And kind of building on what Deb said is that, that's really where we live, Sonya, that, we kind of started in that place where, as we were doing our original research, as I said, starting this journey, it was like, how do we create an empirical measurement for diversity and inclusion? And after we finished the initial research, what I recognized, I had been living in that place where diversity and inclusion was code for underrepresented. And that what we had done in creating the g-dii assessment is that it actually, was a voice for everyone. It actually, it was no longer an us versus them. So now as we go out there, we are really looking at how does culture impact business and enterprise performance and ultimately revenue.
It's really important that in any D&I initiative, everybody, all employees are able to see themselves as beneficiaries of the initiative. And so one of the things I really appreciate about g-dii and the indicators that you study is that it makes it very easy for that inclusive piece to stand very high in the initiative itself. And I think that's absolutely critical. So can we just talk a little bit more before we're done here about what's most critical from an M&A perspective? Before you start the merger, give me three things for our listening audience. Let's consider this the consulting piece of it, right? Give us three things to take away from our conversation.
I'm going to let Deb go with that. Deb?
Okay, let's see. Three things. First, understand what your culture is at multiple levels. Don't assume it's one thing because it's probably multiple things. Decide what you believe is important to you and look for the gaps. So that would be my first. The second, find out what among your different components of culture is actually working for you, is actually providing the right outcome for your business, the right financial, the right ethical, the right motivational outcome for your business. And third, work to retain what works best for you and try to find the right comfort zones for your employees so that they go into the merger not feeling that sense of fear and uncertainty, but feeling like they are welcomed into the merger and they're part of the process. So you could add to those, Greg?
I couldn't say it better, so I'm going to leave it there.
Well, I will just add to that and say that it's very nice to have an organization and a tool like the g-dii assessments to be able to facilitate those very kinds of cultural assessments as you contemplate going into a merger or an acquisition. And so with that, I'm just going to thank you both so much for being here once again. We may have to have a part 3. I don't know. I feel like this is a conversation we could just continue indefinitely. But Deb and Greg, thank you so much for being here again with me. And I want to thank the listening audience for being here as well, and to say see you next time, next week, same time on the Business Channel on Voice America. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks for listening this week. You can tune in live to Beyond Financials, the people side of mergers and acquisitions, every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and 12 noon Eastern Time on the Voice America Business Channel. Please join your host, Sonya Weigle, again next week.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Business Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericabusiness.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the preceding program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.